If something is revealed to you in the spiritual realm, it is your soul that revelation is given to. It is left for your soul to bring that revelation to light from your deep consciousness through your interaction with your mental and sensory consciousness. If your blood and your deep consciousness were to be subjected to experimentation under a microscope or any sort of advanced scientific machine, your soul will neither be seen in your blood nor your deep consciousness. Just as the Mortal Kombat game will not be found on the disc when subjected to a microscope or an advanced scientific instrument. But when placed in a proper environment, its dimensional reality will be manifested. Yet in spiritual definition and principle, your soul is right there, present in your blood and your deep consciousness. So to answer the question, where in the human body is the soul located? The soul is spiritually marked on the blood and deep consciousness of a man in principle and definition. This is not to say the soul of a man can be found in materiality and corporality on the blood and the deep consciousness of a man when subjected to the experimentation of a microscope. Your soul is not marked on your finger and toes nails. It is not marked on your hair. It is not marked on your teeth or your flesh, but it is spiritually marked on your blood and your deep consciousness. Let me make it more practical with an example. Whether a man be a cripple and his 2 legs and 2 arms get amputated, he still has a soul. He is still morally accountable and recognizable in the spiritual world, because there is the necessity and presence of the blood and deep consciousness where the soul is spiritually marked on. Contrast this with a man who no longer have a running blood in his body and doesn't also have a deep consciousness. Such a man is considered gone from the physical realm, and in the spiritual realm, his lifeless body in the physical world is no longer morally accountable. Let's move on to the next question, which says, how does a newly born baby get to acquire a soul? Is it at conception or during gestation? Are our father and mother both responsible for giving us a soul? Or it is solely the responsibility of our mother? We all know how Adam acquired his soul. God gave it to him when he breathed into his material body the breath of life. But then, how do babies after that scenario get to acquire a soul? Is our concern here. Now, to answer this question, let's look at where the journey of a baby starts from. The life journey of a baby starts when the sperm of the father and the egg cell of the mother, which is known as ovum, find each other and merge up. Fertilization then occurs, and the zygote is formed. A zygote is a single cell. Then later on, a morula, which is a solid ball of cells that consists between 16 to 32 cells, is formed. Then later on, a blastocyst, which consists of 200 to 300 cells, is formed. At 3rd week of development, the embryo starts the production of its own blood at the yolk sac. Later on, at the liver, before the bone marrow takes over. The embryo never receives blood from the mother. All it gets from the mother's blood is the exchange of nutrients, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and waste product through some structures on the placenta most of the time during gestation, and through other means at the earlier stage of gestation. Even before this period, the nervous system and its structure haven't started developing. So we cannot say it is the mother that passes a soul to a baby in the womb through the exchange of blood, because the baby doesn't ever uses the blood of the mother directly. The baby develops its own blood, develops its own deep consciousness and mental consciousness. We cannot say the father is the one that gives the baby the soul either, because the semen and all sperms it contains consists of no more than biological genes. So how then do babies acquire souls in their mother's womb? The acquisition of souls by babies in their mother's womb is divinely arranged and defined at the initial stage, when God created man. At the initial stage, man got his soul with just a breath of life. And in this very instant, the spiritual definition and foundation of how another human will get his soul was spiritually laid along. So it isn't your father or your mother that gives you your soul when in the womb, but Almighty God, because He has already spiritually defined these things and laid these things out in principle right from the beginning. So when you were in your mother's womb, being built biologically, you were also being built spiritually because of the spiritual definition and principle already laid out. The blood running in your body today didn't start off being given to you by your mother or father. The biological principle was already laid out for you to develop it on your own. Same way with you getting the soul already spiritually provided for. So when God said to Jeremiah that when he was in his mother's womb, he knew him already, he isn't talking about his flesh, blood, and bones, but rather the spiritual entity in him, the soul in him. Let's move on to the last question, which says, when we die, what happens to our souls? When we die, our soul doesn't die with us. When our flesh, blood, and bones cease to exist, our spiritual self doesn't stop existing. I don't want to dwell on the immediate destination of the soul at the point of death. Whether the soul immediately proceeds to heaven for judgment, or it remains in a state of rest, awaiting resurrection, then judgment, as there are different beliefs by different sects and groups, is not the main concern here. But it should suffice to say, at death, our soul, which is our spiritual self and identity, does not perish with our flesh, blood, and bones.